Good evening, everyone. We're just going to wait a minute or two at the start of our program tonight to make sure everybody is logging on and can hear and see before we start talking to our special guest. Thanks for being with us tonight. And while we're waiting for everybody to log on, feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself, say where you're listening in from, what books you've been reading. Go ahead and discuss amongst yourself. We'll get started just shortly after the hour here.
Ooh, Minnesota, yay.
Hi, Minnesota.
Oh my God. So good to see you, Joy.
All right. Why don't we go ahead and get started this evening? I just want to say welcome, good evening. We're calling in here ourselves from Milwaukee, Wisconsin with Milwaukee Public Library. This is the Milwaukee Public Library Book Chat program. Each month we focus on a different theme and occasionally bring in guests from the public. My name is Beth. I usually work at the East Branch Library as an adult reference assistant. And with me tonight is my co-host Greg, who is the manager of the Center Street branch. He's been very busy this week handing out N95 masks to all of our patrons. So I'm so glad you had the time to join me this evening. As I said before, feel free to use the chat box to interact with each other and to share your book recommendations. We will definitely have time at the end for questions for today's special guest, so do make sure to use that Q&A box throughout the event. You can go ahead and sit back and relax, enjoy the interview and the recommendations. We'll be emailing you in a couple days after the program to make sure you get all those book recommendations and the links where you can check them out from the library. So don't feel like you need to write any notes down. Let's see. Any thoughts on the mask, Greg?
It was so many. And
so many.
Yeah, I'm glad to be doing librarian duties instead of mass duties. That's for sure.
Love it. And so I guess without further ado, I'd love to introduce our special guest this evening. It's Rochelle Melander. She's my friend and also a wonderful library patron of mine from the East Branch. She wrote her first book at 7 years old and has published 11 books for adults. Mightier Than the Sword, Rebels, Reformers, and Revolutionaries Who Changed the World Through Writing is her debut book for children. That just came out recently in 2021. She's a professional certified coach, an artist educator, and the founder of Dreamkeepers, a writing workshop for young people. She lives here in Milwaukee with her husband, children, and 2 dogs. We'll send you her website information at the end of our presentation and in that follow-up email. Thank you so much for being here, Rochelle. We're so excited to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So we know each other. I see Rochelle all the time at my work when I'm working in person. She's an amazing patron that we get to see a lot, checking out books, and we've done some library programs together. She loves coming to our in-person programs. But I want to hear a little bit more about all these different hats that you wear with kind of a writing and creativity theme. Can you tell us more about some of those?
Yeah, so I am first and foremost a writer. I write books, and as Beth mentioned, I've written 12 books that are published, 11 for adults and 1 for children. I also write periodicals. So I write a lot for Milwaukee Lifestyle magazine and for other kind of national sets on the national scene. I have a blog that I've kept since 2007 or something like that. So honestly, posting once a week for all those years, a lot of that. As in that field of writing, I also edit. So I've been editing a periodical for 20 years. And in that role, I hire writers and then look at their work and edit it for content. I also edit people's books. And then my big job is as a professional certified coach, and I have my own business called Right Now Coach. And I coach writers, especially people with ADHD. I've recently become a certified ADHD coach, and I really work with a lot of people. I've always worked with a lot of people with ADHD. I just haven't necessarily advertised it because I didn't have the training. But now that I'm trained as an ADHD coach, I work with a lot of people whose big kind of gap between getting their words on paper is that they can't focus. They're so distracted. And so I really help them with that. And then the last hat that I wear, and probably my favorite hat, is teaching kids. So I have a program called Dreamkeepers that I started back in 2005. And I started it at a church that I was attending, and we soon outgrew that, and we went to Atkinson Library in 2007, and have been at various branches of the Milwaukee Public Library ever since.
Yeah, I think you were there when I worked at Mitchell Street like 5
Yes.
years ago, 4 years ago,
Yes.
maybe. Yeah,
That
periodically.
was my favorite.
What are some of the things that you do with the Dreamkeepers programs that you teach the kids?
So when I started Dreamkeepers, the idea was to really to share the writing mentors that I've loved with young people. And so it started honestly around like Martin Luther King Day. And so we would do Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. And we would do Young, Gifted, and Black. And we would do Langston Hughes. I have a bunch of Langston Hughes's poetry. So I'd bring these in, and I would share these with the young people and then use these as writing prompts. And that's how the idea for Mightier Than the Sword came about, is that I really wanted to have a book that had a lot of the work I'd been doing with young people in it. And so Dreamkeepers has really, through the years, I've tried to bring together a few things to engage young people. I've noticed that young people today, because of kind of being so connected to screens and visuals, really want to do a lot of art more than they want to do writing. So my goal was always to combine some sort of a mentor text with an art exercise and a writing exercise all in one. So we would do things like, at this time of year, snowflake poems. I would teach them how to fold and cut out snowflakes, which teaches all sorts of great things about spatial relations. And then once we had that beautiful snowflake, we'd work on poems about them. And then we would write the poem right on the snowflake so they could take it home and hang it in their window. And then, we did little origami poems where they would fold paper. We did poems on rocks. So we would paint rocks and paint short poems on one side of rocks. That was a Mitchell Street library program.
Yeah, I remember that one.
We did a lot of tiny books. I love learning how to fold tiny books and then write them. Young people like that because it's really small and doable. I think I was talking to you, Beth, I think about how much that is the piece I've missed the most during the pandemic, is getting to be in the library with young people. I got my vaccine booster at a former Milwaukee Public Library that they're now using to do vaccines and testing. And it was the weirdest thing, because I kept wanting to go up to children in this old library and say, do you want to write? And you can't, because we're all there for something different. But but I miss the kids so much.
That change has really impacted your own creativity and work, and how you have to, focus and work on all the things that you're putting out these times. So kind of my big overarching question for this session was, how do you foster your creativity during kind of these unprecedented times? What has been working for you, or what's something that hasn't at all worked for you that you've tried? Because I don't know, I've tried a lot of different things of focus from working at home, which is a big difference for me too.
Yeah, this has been really hard because I work at home all the time. I've always worked at home. And so for me, I got kind of my creative juices from going to the art museum, teaching at the library, visiting with my library friends, doing things like the plays at the Milwaukee Rep, or going to concerts or Summerfest. That was how I got my creative juices flowing. And now I'm not doing any of that, or very little of that. And so I'm kind of like dealing with this very stable, boring life. And that is not working. That does not help with creativity and not having anything new. So I really tried to seek things out. So I sought out A lot of artists are doing these online concerts, either for free or small contributions. So I tried to do those. That's not, it's not the same, it's just not the same hearing like Brandy Carlisle on your computer, but it helps. I tried to, like, there's a wonderful website called, I think it's like Window on the World. And so it's a place where you can go and you get to see someone else's view from their window. And so when I work, what wasn't working was taking a break and going to Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and just getting depressed. What did help was going to a place like Window on the World, where I'd see outside of someone's window in Tuscany or Slovakia, or and you can just keep refreshing and get a different window again and again, and just imagine, well, what would my life be like if I was looking out on this farm? The other thing that I found is that I had to carve out time for creativity. So I have a desk in my bedroom where I have all my creativity books and I have all my art supplies. And now I'm finding that I actually have to like set it out in the morning and schedule time to do it, and then decide that I'm going to go up there for that half an hour or 45 minutes and play with these art supplies, because otherwise it just sits on the shelf. So you really need to seek it out. You need to carve out the time. You need to play. And I think anytime you can try to learn something. So I think the nice thing about the pandemic is a lot of people have gone online with their classes. So if you can seek out something, I have a colleague who teaches ukulele. She's from like London. She teaches ukulele online. So you could learn ukulele, you could learn art. I've done some wonderful art workshops, many free, just by looking for those. And because I think that connecting with people is part of what we do when we're being creative. So it's okay to do things alone, but we need some of these things where we're like on Zoom like this with other people.
Absolutely agree with that. Even just being able, I remember working at home for such a long time, and then my first couple of shifts back in the library, with being able to see some patrons that I remember seeing just the normal, like not normal, but like how life was a little bit before. And it really did help me personally, having that little bit of human contact, because it can be really isolating. And I know you've been a really great virtual library program attender and presenter for us too, which I so appreciate. Rochelle has taught me how to fold a zine out of a piece of paper, I think a few times. I'm still really not good at it.
Yes, thank you to our attendee who talked about window swap is the place where you go.
Yeah, we'll find that link and send it along with our follow-up email. I have not heard of that one. My new little energy booster in the morning is doing the daily Wordle game, which is online, where it's a 5-letter word and you get 5 tries to guess what the word is. So that's what I've been trying to use, which I enjoy. Let's see. So we kind of touched on your new book, Mightier Than the Sword. I have a copy, which you were so gracious to give to me, and I bought one for my kiddo too, who's 10, and we've been having fun going through all the different people. I like it as a writing resource too, just for myself, because you just have really great advice in there. But you had to launch that book during the pandemic, which we kind of talked about. So I'm sad that you haven't been able to do too much in person for that. But has there been any, while you were doing your research, was there any person that kind of stuck out to you while you were doing that research that was either really surprising or somebody new that we might not have heard about before?
Yeah, so let me just give readers who maybe haven't seen the book a little bit of information. So Mightier Than the Sword is a collection of 40 biographies. And then there are 5 interludes, and there are probably 100 little sidebars. And each chapter, this is Sarwana, each chapter has an essay about the person. It has sidebars about people who are kind of like that person. And then at the end, there's a right now, so people, so readers can learn about the person and then write their own stories. And then there's a little bit of information. Sometimes there's also an art project for each of them. This was so fun because I learned about so many people. One of the people that I've been thinking about lately is Mary Garber. She was from the South, and she was one of the very first female sports writers. And she was really well known for the fact that she, on her own, started writing about young people at Black high schools and elementary schools. So she was really instrumental in writing about young Black athletes and telling their stories in her paper, which was in her day was not done. She started writing for her family newspaper. She created a family newspaper when she was a little girl. And then she went off to do writing. When she started in journalism, she couldn't do anything but the society pages, which she hated. And then because of the war, because of World War II, she got her break to do sports writing and loved it. And the woman went to football school, she went to golf school, she went and learned everything so she could do this. And the great, of course, indignity is that at first she wasn't even allowed to sit in the sports writer's box. She was made to sit with the wives because they wouldn't let women in the sports writer's block. And she would have to sneak into the locker room behind men because they didn't want women in the men's locker room. So she was just this spitfire who would run up and down the field, to cover what was going on and just force her way into locker room. Ended up getting wet once when she was waiting in the showers because she was hiding in the showers so she wouldn't see the naked men. So she was interesting. Another person is Sor Juana. Sor Juana was a nun in Mexico who just wrote one of the most incredible manifestos about women and women's ability to do theology. So she was fascinating. And she wanted at 3, she heard about college and realized she could only go if she was a man. And so she asked her mom if she could dress like a boy and go to college. And this was at 3 years old. And when she was a teenager, she decided to use her hair as kind of like a incentive to learn Latin. So she cut her hair and tried to learn as much Latin as she could before it grew out. Odd woman, but very fascinating. Another surprise was Charles Darwin. So I'd always heard about Charles Darwin. I never realized that he was first of all, his father thought he would never amount to anything. He was quite a ne'er-do-well as a kid. He skipped school all the time. He hated school. He and his brother would go to this backyard kind of chemistry set that they had, and they would create kind of laughing gas and other kind of explosive things. And his nickname, in fact, as a grade school student was Gas, because he would create all these explosions. And then he went on to become a doctor, and he dropped out of med school. And his dad said, "You will never amount to anything." Then he went to divinity school and ended up not really doing much with that. He ended up becoming a naturalist and went on this 5-year voyage, which is where he got all of his data to come up with his history of his evolutionary theory. But he was miserably sick that whole time he was on this trip. And then mostly for the rest of his life, he was a very ill man. So he worked about 2 hours a day and spent the rest of the time puking. And he was so I was just fascinated by that because I just kind of always assumed he was this amazing man of science from birth, and he wasn't. He was a kind of a ne'er-do-well.
Yeah, one question I had about it, knowing you and what kind of things you have done with the library. When I went to get the book, I was like, this is a 920. That's a biography section. I'm like, well, that's weird. I didn't expect that. And then I got into it. I realized that those are just one part of the book. So I'm kind of curious on how you bridged these biographies with helping people write and getting creative juices going. How did you come to that meeting point, I guess?
Yeah, I really wanted to help young people see the many ways that writing is part of our everyday life. I work with so many kids, and I've told this story before. I work with so many kids who don't want to write, who don't feel like they need to write, need to learn to write. And so the story I tell all the time is being at Atkinson Library and sitting at one of those little kids' table on this. Oh, maybe a young teenage boy comes up to me and I invite him to write, like I invite everybody to write. And he's like, I don't have to, I'm gonna become a police officer. I won't have to write. And I was like, I think you will. And so we had this long talk about what he would have to write and what that would look like. And, I'd love to talk to him now. He probably is by now a police officer, and see how his writing is going. So when I started searching out people, my goal was to find people who wrote things other than just stories. So, I wrote about Florence Nightingale. She did a lot of work with writing about data and visualizing data to help people understand what was happening with the soldiers' health during the war. I wanted to write about politicians like Patsy Mink, who wrote a law. She was responsible for Title IX. But before that, she was part of a letter writing campaign to help her school have integrated dorms. So I wanted to show young people that even if they're not going to write a novel or a story or a poem, they can use their creativity to change the world through writing. And so I'm really interested in that intersection between different disciplines and how writing shows up in there, and how creativity shows up in there. So that was kind of the inspiration. And I'm always looking for those kind of wacky ways that people write. So one of the projects we did when I was at the library, it was based on some guy in Atlanta did this thing called found poetry. So he would find 3 headlines or 3 statements and paste them together on a sheet and then make lots of copies and then post them on bus stops and so forth. And so I had the students do that. I had them go through online sites and newspapers and so forth and find, cool little things and make little haikus. And that's just kind of a fun way to engage with news and literature. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does perfectly. And, like an adult coming at this book, I was like, oh, this is great. I get to get like little snippets of history on all these people.
Yes.
And then, me not being too creative, I'm like, oh, well, that would be something fun to do with my daughter eventually. But it can be, it's great for anyone because I really like short snippets of stuff.
Yes.
It's really, really accessible. And like you can read one and then put it down and come back to it. It doesn't require you to just sit and read the whole thing. And I have to tell you, like, after reading through a lot of these things and what you just said, I didn't ever consider myself a writer. I read a lot of books. But that said, I review everything that I read, and I do write professional book reviews, and that's writing. And I never really thought about myself as a writer until I read your book and was like, I'm a writer too. It's just everybody does it in a different way. And I like that the best about your book, because it does show kids that writing bridges all the disciplines that you might go into. And it kind of brings that A letter into the STEM part of everything that seems to be the focus these days. So I super appreciated that as somebody who is in the humanities. We're a part of this too.
My vision was that a science teacher or a sociology teacher or a poli-sci teacher could have this book in their classroom and pick it up as a extra kind of exercise. And I try to cover things that kids need to know, like putting together some sort of a research project, and how to do an observation journal, how to do that scientific journal, how to ask scientific questions, all those kinds of things that you might have to do in other fields. I wanted to be a part of this book.
So awesome. So obviously we're in a library program here, and Greg and I always like to make sure to ask our guests if they have a specific library memory from growing up, or a way that the library kind of unusually helped you on your path to where you are today. And I'm sure you have something or many stories for us. So if you could pick one, what would you want to share with everyone?
I was kind of a library geek as a kid. And when I was 7, I really struggled at school because I was reading way above my level, and the teacher wanted me to take out books that were only picture books. And my mom had to write a whole letter. But at the library, I could take out whatever other books I wanted. And so the summer after 2nd grade, I won the library reading program. Like, I remember we had a certificate, and we had to put down a little dot for each, they're parts of a caterpillar. So for each book we read, we wrote, and I had like 120 of them. And so this is what I won. These 3 little Maurice Sendak books, the Little Chicken Soup Library, and I still have them and I adore them. So that was my picture was in the paper, small town Wisconsin library. I got my picture in the paper, and I got to have my little books. So I felt so special, winning. Like, honestly, what an amazing gift. But I felt so special winning those.
Isn't it funny how most of the authors that we interview like have such strong connections to libraries? I wonder if there is a connection.
I love it. I love it so much. I want to quick ask you a follow-up question to that, because somebody asked from the audience. So there is a 7-year-old who is watching with their parent. Her name is Serena, or 6-year-old. I'm sorry, Serena. Their name's Serena. And they just wanted to know, I have a school library and I go there every Thursday. I really like my school library. I would like to hear more about the first book you wrote when you were 7.
Oh, so it was a book about Halloween, and it was a book about a family and what they did on Halloween. So it's in my closet. And I think I illustrated it myself, and my mom or my grandma actually wrote the script out for me. But I think, Serena, because you're 7, this would be a good time for you to write your story of going to the library or something fun that you've done.
I agree. And then bring it in. You can come to any Milwaukee Public Library and show up. We would love to see that so much. Very cool. So as we wrap up our questions, is there anything that you've been reading or watching or consuming specifically during the past few months or year that has really either been a departure in your normal or just something that's really been helping you?
So I am a huge mystery fan, and I discovered Sherry Thomas's Sherlock Holmes series, where Sherlock Holmes is actually a woman who, creates this male Sherlock Holmes character. So a study in Scarlet Women. I heard her speak at a writing conference, and at a writing conference, I mean online on my computer. And I just fell in love. So Sherry Thomas is primarily known for her romance. And she's very famous and she's amazing. And these are just really well done. So I'm on the 3rd one. I've been reading some romance because I love romance. I don't think I would have, I need a little mystery with mine. So I like things like A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Mayhem. It was really fun. The other thing I've done, I have a whole, I could talk about books for 6 hours. The other thing I've done is I've gone to that section of the library that has how-to books and taken out books on lettering, rock painting, mending. So this, Japanese stitching is really popular right now. And I don't necessarily do it, but I take it out and I look at it. So sometimes I'll just, now that libraries are open, which is amazing, I just go into a section that I don't know a lot about, and I look and I take out some things that spark my interest. So it's a great way to get to know a lot of different things, and it's free.
And then if you're like, great, this was amazing, I'm so glad I checked this out, or it was fine, but you just return it, and that's great. That's exactly the point. Yeah, I love Sherry Thomas. I haven't read that series yet, but I'm going to. She writes like rip your heart out of your chest romance novels, and then she puts it back. It goes, it's okay. So I've been reading her romances, so we have that in common. Let's see, we have a couple more comments. Somebody would like to know if you could share a couple ways to get through writer's block.
Yeah, writer's block is really hard. I think the first thing is to have a regular writing practice. So if you're doing it every day, it's not as scary or precious. I think when you write once a week, and often we have to do that because of our life, it's like, oh my gosh, if I don't get something done in these 2 hours, I'm a failure. So the first thing is to do a regular writing practice, and don't worry if you have a day where it doesn't work, because we all have days when things don't work. The next thing to do is do something, some sort of pre-writing. I find that actual writing is really hard. And so it's good to do like a mind map, where you can put your topic in the center, and then like spokes on a bicycle, you put your ideas for what you might want to write about, and you just brainstorm for 10 minutes. And then when you start feeling like, oh, I think I have something I might want to say, then start writing. One thing that can be really helpful is to do that maybe the day before, or jot down some ideas the day before, and then let your subconscious work on it and then write it. Another thing that can be helpful is if you think about who you're writing for, and it could be you at a younger age, or it could be a friend, and you think about your writing as a letter or a story you're telling. Sometimes when I'm writing fiction, and I feel a little bit more anxious about my fiction than about my nonfiction because I don't have as much experience, I'll think, okay, what if I were telling this story to a child? And then start writing it. And I did that with a lot of these essays because I wanted to make them interesting. And there was just so much information. You know, you think about, how do I write an essay about Martin Luther King Jr. when he's written his own like 800-page autobiography, and then there are like thousands and thousands of books about him. And so I had to just say, okay, what if I were just telling this story to a kid? And then you start writing it out. And then the last thing I'd say is just treat everything you write as just a draft. And you know, you can't fix nothing. So you can fix anything that you write. So you don't have to worry about anybody seeing it or judging it. Just, you know, write it, and then you can go back and fix it later.
Those are some great tips. And then, you know,
note it.
Yeah, I think it's always good to step away and
yes,
think about what kind of the ideas you have too. That always helps me a bunch. We had a comment from someone else on Facebook, which is so true, because I feel like as a librarian, like all we do is read. That's a lie. I write way more than I read when I'm on the job. And so Liz commented, my freshman English teacher made a big deal about all of this writing in our careers, whether it's even notes or memos, and we should all want to be represented well by anything we write. So it's a great observation.
I always tell kids, you know, do you think you might want to get a raise someday? Like, you're going to earn this much money and you want to make more. And they're always like, yeah, of course I'm going to want to make more money. And I said, well, you're going to have to learn how to write a request for a raise, and write why you deserve it in an email. And, you know, that's basically a persuasive essay. But when they think about it as a way to get something they want, you know, it's much more like enticing to them. It's like, ooh, maybe I'll try it.
Or, you know, just even, you know, almost any email you write, you know, it is a representation of yourself. So if you come off looking sloppy in an email to someone important, like that may be how they think of you, you know?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, you know, people are like, oh, kids are always on their phones. Like, well, yeah, but they're texting and reading a lot more. They're writing and reading a lot more than you would understand if you don't do those things. Like, they are writing to each other. They are reading things. They're not calling each other and talking most of the time. It seems like, you know, it's texting and writing, and that's writing too. And it's like,
yep,
Like my daughter was very inclined, she's 10 now, and she was very inclined to work on learning how to type and text because that was really the only way she could talk to her friends right now a lot of the time. And they had to switch over to doing computers and typing assignments. And it's been a good, be like, see, we have to do these things so people know what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Okay, I would love, I think that's all the questions we have, unless Greg, you had any more.
No, I think we're all set for all the good reviews that we get to hear from Rochelle first. Here, I'll pull up the slides.
And then we made sure to grab an example of Rochelle's book if you do want to go back.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so here, I just grabbed a couple shots from the book. So this is kind of what it looks like a little bit closer up, and then just a cute illustration I found of Rochelle reading her book to some kids that she had to, you said an artist drew that for you, Rochelle?
Yes, yes.
And then you worked with the artist for all the illustrations in Mightier Than the Sword.
Yeah, so what happens with a book like this is that I do the writing, and because it was such a heavy book, once we had the names of the people we were writing about, the illustrator just started working on the illustrations on her own. And we didn't really communicate till after the book was published. But she took my research and then she did her own research, and she did just a fantastic job about choosing, as you see in Murasaki's picture, she chose some items that would reflect this woman and her time, kind of like icons. And so that was she just did a fantastic job of bringing these historical and contemporary figures to life.
Mm-hmm. I loved seeing that all together on the page. And if you have a young person or somebody in your life who liked the Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls, which my kid did, this is a great next choice. It's really great, and I loved all the art and seeing all these historical figures. All right, but now we're at the point in our program where we're going to do our book recommendations. So Rochelle is going to start. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what you brought for everyone today?
Yes. So these are three that do very different things. So Twilight Tharp, The Creative Habit, is just a wonderful collection of essays that are a little bit prescriptive. So they're essays about the creative practice and the creative habit, and they're prescriptive in that they give you assignments and ways that you can use this in your daily life and in your daily practice. What I love about Twilight Tharp's The Creative Habit is that it is about creativity and can be applied to anything that you do. So it's not necessarily writing or art or dance. It can be used with any of it. And I found it just very inspiring. I think it's great if you can take this and maybe read it with a friend and talk about it regularly. And it's really widely available at the library. The second book that I like is by Danny Gregory, and he's written a lot of books. And so he's a visual artist. What I like about this, and this is going to help you with your visual art, but it's going to help you with your visual art even if you're not a professional artist. So he has lots of little ideas that you can play with in terms of your writing or your art. And what I like about this book is that his descriptions are pretty short. So you don't end up reading so much that you never get to the art. And so I feel like if you're going to write or do art, you have to make it easy for yourself. So you need to almost leave your supplies out and work with it on a daily basis. So if I were using either Twyla's book or Art Before Breakfast, I would have a sketch pad or a journal out all the time with a stack of colored pencils or markers or whatever your art thing is, just to play with it. And then the third book I chose is a new book to me, Choose Wonder Over Worry. And I'm actually only about halfway through of this. And it's really a coaching approach to people who maybe deal with a little bit of writer's block or artist's anxiety. It's for people who have a really strong inner critic and need to find a way to kind of like jump past that and do the art you're called to do. And you can use this for kind of unlocking your blocks around any kind of life potential thing you need to do. So it doesn't have to be an art or a writing thing, but she talks a lot about that. And so she's got some nice exercises and journaling exercises, and some really wonderful ways of helping you think about choosing wonder over worry. And if you'll hop to the next page, there's another book that I really want to talk about. This book, I Never Saw Another Butterfly, I discovered probably in high school or college at my local public library. And so what the book is a collection of drawings and poems from children in the Terezin concentration camp. And this was, I think I discovered it while I was also working with children. And I feel like it really helped me understand how important creativity is to our survival in difficult times. So I found this book so moving and so helpful for me when I first discovered it in my 20s. And I've just been thinking about it a lot this year because we're all going through such stress with this pandemic that keeps morphing and changing and affecting all of our lives, and we're experiencing grief. That I think this might be a helpful thing for all of you. A few of the other books that I talk about here, Creativity is just kind of the core kind of academic book on creativity. And I can't pronounce his name, even though I was going to practice today, but I forgot. Things Are What You Make of Them is like the shortest, tiniest book. Like each little page is like a little jotting from a notebook. And it's almost a daily meditation on creativity. So those are like two ends of the spectrum. Creativity from Mahaley, I can't, sorry, Mr. Psychologist is just very deep and heavy and full of lots of good psychological research. And then Things Are What You Make of Them is a very light look. The Creative License, also by Danny Gregory, is going to give you more of what you're getting in Art Before Breakfast, but he does a little deeper dive. Living the Creative Life kind of mines ideas and inspiration from working artists for how you can do art in your daily life. And Creating Time is a book, also another book that has you like choose wonder over worry, kind of look at your life and how you relate to the clock and do some exercises to help you do more art and writing in your daily life. So those are some of the books that I found very helpful. And I have to tell you, I have probably 5,000 books in my house. And I think I have a whole bookshelf at least dedicated to creativity and writing and art books. So this was maybe one of my hardest tasks this year. Of course, it's been a short year so far. So.
When I was like, yeah, you can send me 2 or 3. She was like, what? I was like, you can send me as many as you like. And don't worry, everyone, we will send you this complete list because there are so many gems here and they're all available at the Milwaukee Public Library. So.
Yay, thank you for your recommendations. Well, I wish I could give you ones that are all about creativity, but alas, my reading habits don't go that deep. So I picked 2 books. The first one, Troy by Stephen Fry. I actually reviewed his previous book on our last book chat. This is his new one they came out with, and it's actually in a way quite similar to Mightier Than the Sword, in that it takes the Battle of Troy, the Iliad, and condenses it into characters. And so you get snippets of characters or a place and time. And he's a comedian, as in one of his lives, and a writer, and so much more. And he has this really great, like, dry wit humor to him. So now, as you're reading, learning about all of these, really depressing stuff, the Battle of Troy and everything that happened, he brings really great wit to it. And you can read a chapter or two because they're like 2 pages long, and then you can put it down. You can come back up the next night. It's a great one to have on, like, your bedside shelf. This next one was one of my more favorite ones I read in 2021. The Enemy of All Mankind, and it's kind of it's about this. They weren't really known as pirates then, but basically, the first pirate is, in a modern sense of what we would talk about as a pirate, called Henry Every, who ended up ransacking a royal ship in the Indian Ocean, and he launched the first international manhunt that we have ever seen, and also started this new idea of mass media, in that basically all of the countries of Europe were looking for him. And so, there was all these news stories coming about him. So it kind of like this sensationalism, so that was kind of really cool to see how that happened, and how he kind of changed how international commerce was functioning, and how this whole thing and his relationship with the East India Trading Company really changed the course of history, and how the British government was dealing with India. So a really cool, fascinating story, and it's about pirates. So I mean, come on, right?
Gotta read that. That sounds interesting to me. I would like to read that very much. And the other one too. I have yet to read Stephen Fry, and I should. So, and he's a good audiobook narrator too. Is that what?
Yeah, he does his own audiobooks. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to do that. Okay, I'm gonna go last. So I just heard about this first choice. It's called Hooked by Sutton Foster. It's How Crafting Saved My Life. A good friend of mine recommended it to me, and I was immediately drawn to the premise, which is you might know Sutton Foster from TV shows like Bunhead. She's an actress. So this is a memoir / crafting book where she does a craft and walks you through it, and then based on that craft, she talks about a part of her life, her struggles with mental health, her mother, all sorts of fraught relationships, being in the limelight in tabloids. And so you get a craft while you get a celebrity memoir, which is kind of a conflict of my interests. And when we were doing library programming in person, I had a book to art club, which is how I really got to know Rochelle very well, where we would read a book and then do an art project based on the book. And the whole point of the program was that you don't need to make good art, you just need to make something to be creative and to get those creative juices flowing, because it's just good for you to do that sometimes, regardless of what the product is. Because I am not an artiste, but I do like to make things and cut things with scissors and use glue, and this sounds right up my alley, and I'm really excited to jump into that one. That one's new this year. And then I kind of stole these two from Rochelle's previous list because they sounded so interesting to me. It's by the same author. One is a little bit older, and it's Daily Rituals, How Artists Work. And then the more recent one is Daily Rituals, Women at Work. And the author goes through and has over 100 different people who are in the creative field, or I think in the Women at Work, it's many fields, and they just go through how they do their daily work, what's their tasks, how they break their day up, how they manage to get it done, if they're balancing other things. And it's so astounding to see how different everybody does do their work. There isn't one correct way for anybody. It's kind of finding your own path, which, let me tell you, as somebody who is working a full-time job, both at home and at the library, doing virtual school again with my children, I need a little help sometimes to kind of segment my life back up into manageable chunks. So I'm very excited to jump into both of those. Again, these are all available with your card at Milwaukee Public Library, or if you're listening in from somewhere else, I'm sure your library has these too. All right. And then as we're wrapping up our program today, make sure if you have questions for Rochelle, you can type them in the chat or in the Q&A. But next month, Greg and I are so excited to let everyone know that we're going to be talking with two local women who live on the south side of Milwaukee, Barbara Serda and Valeria Serda, who are part of many projects, but the big ones are La Revo Books and Barbie the Book Fairy. So we'll be interviewing them. I won't tell you too much more about what those two things are because we'll let you tell them, or we'll let them tell you. So you can register for that one right away. That's going to be on Tuesday, February 8th at 6 p.m. And then next slide. Greg, did you want to talk about Martin Luther King Day? Oh, you're muted.
You think I'd have figured that out after all these months about me.
That's all right. We all do it.
Yeah, so forgive me. I haven't dove into all of the stuff that we've published yet about it. I know that it's going to be all virtual. I know it's going to be fantastic, just like it was last year. They were doing some really cool stuff last I heard with trying to get people's memories of Dr. King when he visited Milwaukee and trying to do something out of that. So I hope they did that and something comes of that. But yeah, I would encourage everyone to go because it's even though it's virtual, they do such a great job over there.
It's really cool. Details will be coming every week as we draw closer. You can go to mpl.org/MLK Day, even just to explore that portion of our website. There's a wealth of historic photos and all sorts of beautiful things that have been pulled together. I think they'll be handing out some prizes as well. And from everything I can see, it's just going to be an amazing day. They will be streaming it live on our Facebook page and on YouTube. So you can kind of pop in and out as your schedule allows on January 17th. We hope to see you there. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. Rochelle, any closing thoughts for our time today? We're so grateful you were able to be our first guest of 2022's Book Chat.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I just love books and creativity and the library. I feel like I am a Uber patron. I spend a lot of time on the county cat recommendation requesting books. You can always tell when I've been to a writing conference because all I do, I get like, 20 or 30 books in. Then I come in, I pick up my books, then more come the next day, and I come the next day, and more come the next day. So I'm just there every day. The one thing that I think is really important to remember, and I learned this from, I think it's James Clear, his book, Atomic Habits. So he really talks about that you need to think about what is your identity, and then that your habits have to do with your identity. So if you think of yourself as a creative person, the only way to make sure you're creative is to put it in your habits. So try to make creativity a habit. For a long time, I've written first thing in the morning. And so that's become a habit, but there are other things like I don't make art every day. I don't do other kinds of creative things every day. So my goal this year is to really start taking the things I want to do creatively and put them into my schedule so that they'll become habits. So one thing I'm doing this year is I'm starting my day by reading a poem every day. And I just have a stack of poetry books by my chair and I just pick one and read it. So if there's a way you can start to just put a little habit in, and my coaching tip for that is to marry it or stack it with an existing habit. So if every day you have a cup of coffee and a cookie at 10 a.m., then that might be a time to do one little creative thing. Or if every day you sit down at your computer to answer email, first thing in the morning, then maybe take 10 minutes before you open your email and write. And then go on with your day. But just try to stack that. And then as you do that, over 20, 30, 40 days, that artist thing, that creative thing is going to become a habit for you. So I'm hoping that will
Great
help
advice.
you, because creativity is frustrating when we can't actually participate in it.
I agree. I signed up for poets.org. They will send you a daily poem to your email inbox. So I read that every day or whenever I'm checking my email. And I'm like, I need to maybe stacking that. And I've been bad at that when I'm off or not at work. And like, maybe if I stack that with my Wordle every day,
Oh,
now we're talking.
that sounds great. Yeah,
I
I
used to-
think, go ahead, Greg.
I used to get the word of the day from Webster's, and then I would try to figure out how to use that word of the day in that day, which
Mhm.
sometimes can be a very creative process to try to figure out how to use a weird word.
And the other thing I think that can be really helpful if you want to be creative is to have an accountability partner. That's why so many of us like join classes to do creative things, because, you know, that's why your book to art club was great, because it meant we read a book every month and we did art every month and we had people with us. So it wasn't,
Mhm.
we didn't have
Shared
to,
experience.
yeah, we didn't have to rely on willpower. And, you know, all the research on habits say that if you rely on willpower, you're not going to get it done. You really have to put those systems in your life to make it happen. And one of the systems that really has helped me a lot is having accountability partners who I meet with every week, you know, or I meet with to do like writing online like this. Like we'll just get on Zoom and we'll put it on mute. We'll do our work and then we'll come back and check in. That can really help get stuff done. So any questions from the rest of the crowd before we end? Or are you all just anxious to go out and paint?
So
Draw.
yeah.
And write?
I love it. I don't see any more. So I think we can end our session for tonight and just tell again, thank you so much, Rochelle, for being here. And we will make sure to email everybody the recording link if you want to go back and listen again, and the list of all the books and amazing things we talked about this evening. So
thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rochelle. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah. Oh, some more comments. Just saying thank you. This is a great session and they're so happy to be here. So thanks everybody. See you next time.
All right.